Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on an institution you probably think you know inside and out, the public library. But trust me, its story is way more dramatic than you might imagine.
So where did this idea of a free library, a place for everyone, even come from? Let's get right into it because the real story, well, it's pretty radical. And it goes back thousands of years.
To really get it, we've got to go back, way back, before books were a thing you could just buy. Back then, knowledge wasn't on shelves. It was a closely guarded secret, stored in people's memories or on super rare precious materials like clay tablets or papyrus. I mean, just look at this timeline. For thousands and thousands of years, having access to any kind of recorded knowledge was, well, it was almost impossible for the average person. You had these so-called public libraries in places like Greece and Rome, but public just meant scholars and powerful officials. For everyone else, not a chance. Information was absolutely a privilege, not a right.
And before writing was even widespread, you had what's called oral tradition. I mean, just think about that for a second. This was the only way to keep your culture alive. A perfect example is the ancient Vedas in India, from way back between 1500 and 2000 BC. These sacred texts survived purely because they were memorized, word for word, and passed down from one generation of Brahmins to the next. It's just incredible.
Okay, so if knowledge was locked away for so long, what was the big shift? What changed everything? Well, the idea of a library for everybody. It wasn't some quiet academic thought. Nope. It was forged in the chaos and fire of a massive social and industrial revolution, starting in Britain.
And really, it was like the perfect storm. You had three huge things happening at once. First, democracy starts bubbling up, planting this idea that individuals have rights. Then, boom, the Industrial Revolution hits, and suddenly there's this brand new, educated middle class that is hungry for knowledge. And the final piece? The government actually starts making basic education a thing, so more and more people can read. All of a sudden, people weren't just able to read, they started demanding the right to access information.
All right, so this revolutionary idea starts in Britain, but then it starts to travel. And that's where our story heads next, to India, where this concept of a public library took root and grew into something totally unique and incredibly powerful.
But the first libraries that popped up in India weren't exactly public. See, they were based on the British model, which meant they were subscription libraries. Think of them like a private club. You had to pay fees, you had to put down a security deposit. I mean, they were literally called elitist and unegalitarian. This is the complete opposite of that radical new idea of a library that's funded by the public, for the public, and totally free for anyone who walks in the door.
So yeah, the subscription model was a start, but it wasn't the revolution we're talking about. The real game changer, the big turning point, that came from within India, from some truly visionary leaders who saw a different path forward. And you really can't talk about this without talking about the Baroda movement. The ruler of the state of Baroda at the time, Sir Sayaji Rao III, did something absolutely groundbreaking between 1906 and 1911. He wasn't just thinking about opening one library, no. His vision was way bigger. He wanted to build an entire network for knowledge, something that would end up being a model for the whole country.
And this is what made it so brilliant. Look at this three-tiered system. You have the main, central library, sure, but then it pushed outwards. It created village libraries to serve rural areas, and get this, traveling libraries, basically the original bookmobiles, to reach even the most remote corners. This wasn't just about putting books in a building. It was a system designed from the ground up for total, complete access for everyone.
But here's the part that was truly genius. They knew that a library is way more than just a building with books in it. So they established India's first library school. Think about that. They were investing in the people, the librarians, who could actually turn these book collections into living, breathing centers for learning. They weren't just building libraries. They were building an entire ecosystem for knowledge.
Okay, so fast forward to 1947. India gains its independence. And this dream, this vision of a library system for the entire nation, it becomes a really important piece of the puzzle of building this new country.
And right at the beginning, the momentum was huge. You've got the Madras Public Libraries Act in 1948, which set up a legal framework. Then in 1950, the Delhi Public Library is launched as a big pilot project with UNESCO. It felt like the future was right there for the taking. But all that hope and optimism was about to run smack into a very harsh reality.
Because when a committee, the Sinha Committee, was sent to check on the state of the nation's libraries, what they found was, well, it was pretty bad. They described most libraries as just stagnant pools of books, And worse, over 90% were still operating as those old-school subscription libraries. It was a huge wake-up call. The ideal was there, but the reality on the ground was a completely different story. The revolution was nowhere near finished.
And that phrase, stagnant pools of books, it really pointed to a much deeper problem, a problem that's still a huge challenge today. It all comes down to money. Just look at this breakdown. When you have a situation where 85% of your budget is just going to staff salaries, what's left for everything else? Almost nothing. That means no new books, no new services, no community programs. The library just stops evolving. It gets stuck.
So after all this, what's the big takeaway? It's that the public library was never, ever just about books. It was born from a truly radical idea that every single person has a right to knowledge, that it's not a privilege for the few. And when you think about today, right, we're drowning in information, but we're starving for sources we can actually trust. It makes you wonder, isn't the library's role as that trusted, free, open hub for the community not just still relevant, but maybe more vital than it has ever been?